Hello everyone, my name is Lady and I'm currently a year 12 student. Last year I did my art IGCSE and today I will be giving you tips and advice on what to do with your art IGCSE and things that I wish I would have known when I was in your spot. Now, before I begin explaining to you what I did and my experience, I want to start with the fact that I know a lot of students don't really know how they get graded because they assume that it's going to be the same as the other subjects, but that's not the case. So it's very important that we have a look at the grading criteria. And so we have the different AOs. There are 4 AOs and each of them weight a 25% in the first and the second component. And it's really important to remember these as I'm going to speak about them when I go through my own project. So we have record, explore, develop, and present. And I hope that it helps it make a little bit more clear on what they represent and what you should be doing to get the marks for each assessment objective. Now, before I begin, I know a lot of year 10s are picking their topics right now, and one of the things I want to say is do not overcomplicate yourself when you're picking a topic. You know that you'll be able to take on the topic if you can speak about it and fully talk in detail about the pieces that you're going to produce. But if you cannot, it's going to be really hard for you to put it on paper. So that's something to keep in mind when picking a topic. And another thing to keep in mind, which is really interesting, is that you need to make sure that primary pictures are easily available for it. If you pick something that you know will be hard to get pictures of, this is where you start losing marks because it's really important that the examiner sees that they're your own pictures and not pictures from the internet. So again, if you can find pictures, primary pictures of the topic you're picking easily, then that's a good sign that you should probably pick the topic. Now, if you're in year 11, right about now, you should be doing development of idea, or you will be doing development of idea. So it's important that you realize that if you have a topic, you can link it to anything around you, to pretty much anything, as long as you make some sort of link between the topics. But you can pretty much do anything with your topic. You can go in any direction as long as you show a link. It's important to not constrict yourself to a box or to what you have thought that you could do, because you can go in so many directions. So that's just think out of the box. And do not let the topic that you picked just let you sit in that small area. You can always do another topic and then link it to the one that you have, obviously a subtopic. Now, another thing to remember for both year groups is that you're telling a story and that eventually you're going to reach a conclusion. So you need to plan out our journey that you're going to encompass. When I planned my journey for my art coursework, I did not complete all the things that I wrote in my planning, but I did majority of the things that I said I was going to do. And sometimes along the way you start changing your plans, and that's okay. But as long as you've got a starting idea of where you want to go and what you want to do, that is good, then you're good to go. And later you'll change your mind, but for now, it's okay. For my art IGCSE, I scored an A-star, and I want you to keep this in mind when I'm talking about tips and things that I wish I had known, because these are really important and because that probably help you out and help you score the grade that you want. So without further ado, I'm going to go through my coursework. This is for my first component. And one thing that I want to make clear is that you need to make sure you get primary images. If you're starting right now, or if you're doing a development of idea, get primary images and try to use secondary images as less as possible. Like if it's really necessary, use them, but if it's not, try to get your own primary images because that gives you a higher score in majority of the AOs. For example, for my first ever side, I decided I wanted to have all of them to be primary. Nothing in this side is secondary because it's the first thing that the examiner sees. So it's very important that they are surprised or that they get the idea that this is my work and this is not somebody else's work. So all of these pictures right here are primary, and all the pictures for my recordings are primary. The first AO is recordings. So it shows the examiner that you're practicing with media, or that you're trying new things, or that you're exploring the beginning of your topic, which is why it was so important to put recordings on the first page, which is exactly what I did, and that's something to keep in mind. whenever you start a topic, be it component 1 or component 2, you need to have a lot of recordings that show where you want to go or what you're talking about at the beginning. It's also very important to try out different medias for your recordings and that you do everything yourself with your own primary pictures. One thing that's also important, I noticed a lot of my classmates in the last batch who were doing a lot of human-related topics did not really want to take pictures of other people or were shy in the process of doing so. This is for your arts IGCSE grade. If you need to take pictures of somebody else, get their permission and then just take the pictures because it's for you and it's for your grade eventually. I took all my pictures at the beginning of year 10 and I pretty much just used those for the entirety of my coursework. And it was so useful at one point because I wasn't running around like everybody else trying to get primary pictures in for this type of collages. So it's important that you try to ask other people for pictures if you need to and not shy away from it. And the same goes for any other objects or any other things that you need to do. It's very important that you do so because you want to get the marks, and that is where I was going with getting the marks. For primary pictures, another thing is you need to make sure that you're exploring media. Even if you're in year 10 or year 11, there's a media you haven't tried, do a piece on it. I had never done oil pastels until I tried this out. And I know it's a very recurrent piece and that many of you art students have seen it in any of the classrooms that you have been, but at least I gave it a go and I wrote that in my annotations that I was trying the media and that I wouldn't mind keep on trying it in my project to improve. There's a lot of things like that, like printing. I had never properly done printing and I tried it out here and I made sure the examiner knew in my annotation that it was something new for me, but I was willing to give it a try in my art coursework for the purpose of learning. And that is exactly what you're doing. You're learning because it's a practical subject, so to make the most out of it and take advantage of it. And so it's very important that you play around with media in the first 2 sides of your work. I try to put as much of all the medias that I had, so I have oil pastels, printing, watercolors, pencil, pen and wash, sand. I also have pencils, more pencils. There's a lot of things here and it's important that the examiner sees that you're trying out a lot of things. You were also, again, writing a lot of annotations. One tip that I want to give to your year 10s and also to the year 11s right now, if you haven't started writing your annotations, please do so because at the end, when you're mounting all your coursework, they are lifesavers. You literally just copy and paste on your annotations from the analysis that you did before in your annotations. It is really useful. Every time you do a piece, please make sure you write at least 1 or 2 lines about it because that's what I did. For example, for this piece, I had written, I've been to a lot of countries with my families and I've collected a lot of bracelets, I've collected a lot of bracelets, and so, it just shows diversity in itself because they all come from different places. And I had just that written in my annotations, and then I used it as a reference, and then I wrote that somewhere here in my annotations. And it was just perfect because I didn't really have to think or anything. I could just copy-paste straight onto my annotations, which is really important because you don't want to be wasting time when you're also doing your exams. It's something that you need to just do right away because you don't want to be preparing for your math early entry as you're mounting for something else. It just doesn't work, which is why you need to prepare yourself beforehand. Before I continue, I want to say that if you don't really know how to annotate, you can ask any of the art teachers. They have a lot of resources, and also you can look online on different ways how to annotate. It's really not that difficult. It's like doing English literature essays for art. And if you don't get the reference, then you can just ask an art teacher and they'll let you know how to do it. Moving on from there, I decided to do a study of my surroundings. So this is where I said you can pretty much just do anything around you, things that you've seen or that you did before. In this, I decided to try out using some secondary pictures, but as you can see, I haven't used many since I started my project so far, and I didn't really use many after that. This is pretty much, I think, one of the only times I used secondary pictures, if I used secondary pictures at all. I did use a bit after that for one of my mood boards, but I really didn't use in excess. So I used it to make these drawings, which I wouldn't have the primary pictures for anyway because I haven't been to Korea. I also made sure I did my annotations, and it's also very important if you do something out of the box yourself. For example, when I went to China, I made a stamp with my name on it. So it's something more cultural, something more diverse, which kind of relates to the topic that I was doing. One time I went to the zoo, a study of my surroundings, so I saw some animals. I went to the beach, so I saw a shell. And it's all around me, but it's all kind of diverse in itself. And I try to link that as much as possible so the examiner understood my annotation. And yes, so I pretty much try to explore that in this board. And I try to also use all the techniques that I've learned. So as I said, I went on a trip to China that summer, so I did try out a bit of ink art. And I tried my best on it, and I made sure they also knew in my annotations that it was something that I was doing for the first time. And yeah, so I was also exploring it, and I explored it as well with colored ink. So it's something to think about, and it's things that this is the second AO actually. It's exploring of media, and you get marked on exploring on media. I'm not just saying this to you for the sake of learning, it's because you're also getting marked on it, and 25% of your grade is based on how you explore media and how you use media based on the topic that you've chosen. So it's also very important to consider with the recordings because of the beginning of the project. After that, I decided to go into food, so diversity of food. Again, all the pictures that you see in this board are all primary pictures taken by me. I did not take a single picture of the internet. Another thing that's interesting to think about year 11s when you're mounting is that you have to make sure that the way that you open your flaps is very interesting, because it's very interactive, so that the examiner does not get bored, because the examiner marks a lot of exams per day, per week. They get a lot of exams, so it's something that they see every day. So if you try to do something out of the norm, maybe you catch their attention, maybe you'll get higher marks. So that's important, and that's the idea. So the thing with flaps is that you can do a flap opening in any way, any direction, any shape and form. So that's really fun to play around, and that's what I try to do here. So as you can see, this is the flap, but you wouldn't know unless you actually touched it, which is the disadvantage of having evidence in pictures. And yeah, so you open it, and then you get this, and then you have something else under the flap. The same with this. This was a flap, and this was also a flap. So if you saw the board first, you wouldn't think it was a flap, but then when you start touching around it, you'll see that they open in different ways. Very interesting to think about, because, for example, when you're mounting coursework, again, forgot to mention that apart from having 3 flaps at the top, I decided I wanted to open it like a book. So I opened it like a book, and then here we have it. So you can open it, and then you can have a sneak peek of worldwide foods. Now I'm going to be talking to you about artists. I did 3 artists, and that is the number of artists that you should be aiming for if you want to get an A or an A star. And ideally, that's the number of artists that you should do for your first project. I started with Ruby Silvius. She's a tea-based artist, so she does work on tea bags. Again, I'm really keen on trying new things out and on making things. So I decided to make my own head basket with fruits and take my own primary pictures, and everything here that is not the artist's work, of course, is primary. And my annotations all talk about my pieces and why I decided to do them. Again, when you do your first artist, it's important that you relate to the first 2 topics or the first topic that you talked about. For example, diversity in objects. I decided to do something simple yet fun, so dominoes with different numbers, so different types of objects, dominoes. And then I also decided to relate back to food, because the artist did also a lot of food, so we have food. And then I start to incorporate what I'm going to talk about next, which is diversity in cultures and how tea is related into them. And we're going to look at it in more detail in my artist page. So if you have to do flaps for your annotations because you want to explain something, do so. But make sure that it's also not a lot of annotation. So here it's in detail, tea bags. If you are planning on doing a tea bag artist tip, you need to use both watercolor and another media that's like watercolor that I can't recall right now, but you have to use both, and you need to make sure that you do it by layers. You need to let it dry the first layer and then you do the other layer on top, because you're not going to automatically get the shade that you want. Just a tip for anybody that wants to do a tea-based artist. Yep, so all primary pictures, primary picture, this is artist, more artist, more primary picture. This is my response to my artist piece, and the response is all primary pictures again, and I did the basket and I painted the fruits. So this is what I did to go the extra mile, and you can do so many things in your topics to go to the extra mile and get extra points when it comes to getting graded. So this is more of me trying to experiment with media, like with spray paint. Again, everything relates to the AOs. This is also development of idea, because I'm developing onto something else subtly with my artist. Artist work also gets graded, so your responses are really important as well. The way that you respond to the artist's work and you relate it to what you're doing. So yep, that's that. This is my first artist board, and then from there on, I think, yes, I moved into diversity. So here's where I said I used primary pictures, secondary pictures. Actually, most of this board uses secondary pictures, because I knew on the inside I was going to use primary pictures. So most of you may recognize the people in this art pieces, because they're pretty much some of my classmates. And so this is what I did at the beginning of year 10. I asked if I could take their pictures with their permission, and they said yes, and so I used them for my artwork. So yes, I used secondary pictures for my mood board, but then again, I made up for it using primary pictures, right? So we have primary pictures, we have different types of faces, their cultures, their national animals, national flowers. Again, flaps, I try to be as creative. The mood boards I just split in half, so it opened in two, and then I also had a flap on the inside of those two flaps that open upwards. Then I try to use the images as much as possible, since I was talking about diversity and the differences between us, but I was talking more physical differences. We have different types of eyes, different types of eyebrows. I also tried out some digital art. I know there's a lot of people that are really into digital art, so you can try to do that as well. Try to show another side of you within the art that you're doing, and I only explored it once. And sometimes once is also enough to show that you're learning something new, that you're doing new work. From there on, I continued. This is a secondary picture as well, but I tried to make sure to say, like here, as I added all the pictures that I took then. If you see yourself in this picture, then great. If you don't, great as well. Here you have pictures of everybody that I took, and I put it in a collage because I wanted them to see that I actually went out of my way to take these pictures, and that I wanted them to be primary, even if I used some secondary pictures, that I actually did the effort to take primary pictures. And I cannot stress enough why it's so important, because you want to get those marks and those grades. Again, I did annotations, which I had already done before, so the only thing I needed to do was write them down again. But I had already all the idea written down before from the previous times I did annotations, so that saved me a lot of time. Here we have the pieces more zoomed in and kind of in detail. Each one's come in separately. I got inspirations from a lot of different things. Pinterest is a really good website to kind of look into pictures and more inspiration, annotations, eyebrows, people's eyebrows. You can see that because I wanted to do my mounting really subtly, I only added borders for certain things because I didn't want it to overshadow what I was doing. So you can see here I added a yellow border, there I added a red border. Every single time I changed color for this ink printing, which I again explored and I explained in my annotations that I decided to look into further. I decided to do each of parts of the insides of the color of the ink printing, then more ink printing to show that again I'm trying to develop myself in the skill. And this is AO2, while at the same time I'm doing AO3, which is I think development of idea. Yes, perfect, development of idea. Yep, And so then we have my other artist, but just once again to show you my mounting, because it's really important that you look into mounting. Here I did blue in the middle, lilac on the side, yellow on the side, and red on the top. I used a lot of different colors, but I made sure that they all blended in together and didn't take away the focus of what I wanted to say. From there on, we're moving to my second artist, Luke Gray, an artist that works a lot with people, and that's why I knew I needed to get primary pictures of people. This is what it looks like. I made sure that this one opened from the top, and then I had all my artist work and my artist responses there as well. Again, all primary images. Again, I try to go the extra mile, so I made a necklace using maps from 2 different countries in a different style that wasn't of either countries, but was of Sudan, which is an African style of the country that my classmate was from, who I was inspired to do this drawing from. Again, you can see these pieces. If you want good grades, you need to work and spend time on your pieces, because it's so important that you put emphasis on detail, like I did here. A lot of emphasis on the detail. You can see this took me like around 2 days, and it was just this piece that was so important. I did my annotations on little flap golden paper, which is something you could think about if you don't have enough space, because that was my issue, but then we solved it with the golden transparent paper. More again here, ink printing, like the printing that I talked about at the beginning. Had never done it before, but then I decided to exploit it doing my artist work, and it worked out well because I'm still showing my AO2 and showing my development in the beauty and how I'm becoming more confident, and I'm also saying it in my annotations. Then my artist response of my friend's picture. Again, I explained it, showed pictures. Here is a more focused picture on the jewelry that I did. So we have the necklace and the earrings. And I did 2 different pairs of earrings just to try out different styles. And yes, and then I did her painting, and I made sure that I put maps of different African countries, and then we had her, and then it has a lot of cultural meaning, which I'm not going to go in depth into, but that's what I went in depth into in my annotations. And yes, that's for my second artist, and as you can see, I put the same amount of effort in every single artist page, because if you want to get an A or an A star, you need to show consistency, and that is just a fact. For my third and final artist, and this is where I'm kind of reaching my conclusion in my whole topic of diversity, because I'm leaning now towards people. She's an artist who focuses a lot on people's traits and tries to show their personality through her artwork, but she doesn't try to relate it to their nationality. So she tries to see who they are and try to portray it with her colors and her painting. And that was actually kind of the idea I wanted to reach towards the end. So this is why I chose her as my artist. I did a flap towards the bottom, which is the different type of flap that I did against the last one, which I opened towards the top. So I opened this towards the bottom. Again, different types of flap, different types of mounting. I tried out the splashing of white paint in the background. You can pretty much try out anything that you like. You can even do watercolor on paper and put it as a background. Many people do different things. Annotations, primary pictures, all of them are primary pictures. Artist work. If you want a good artist work, you need to spend time on it because quality. I spent a lot of time on this one, and same on this one because getting that shade of color was difficult. Then we have some pictures to show the artist's work. Here are my artist responses. So I took pictures of my friends in International Day. I used that to my advantage in my project, and I took primary pictures of them, obviously with their permission. And then this is what my final response was. So it was a picture of my friend, and in her arms it says "Say no to prejudice," and that is the whole point of saying no to prejudice. This is an A3 size. This is not this is not a small size. This is like a big size, and I wanted to do just one response, but I wanted to make it a good response. So that's something that you can keep in mind. You can do a lot of photographic responses and then have one main actual painted response that you can have towards the end. And then using my two artist styles, I decided to mix them, the past artist and this artist, and then I created this piece, which also took me quite a lot of time, and all of these things relate to his culture and to his background, and as I try to show his personality through the drawing. I don't know if I did it, but yes. Now we come to my final piece inspiration, and we tried out a mock final piece type of thing, but then I realized I didn't really like it, so I didn't use it as my final piece. But I did put it in to show the examiner that I tried it out and I didn't like it, and I decided to go down another route. So that is what this sole point is about. So I did this as what was supposed to be my final piece, but I decided against it, and I explained why I decided against it. I didn't really like it, and it didn't represent my entire idea. Here I have a lot of primary images that I took that I used in inspiration to this. Again, all primary images. Again, this I had done myself. This picture I took myself. This I did myself, which I will come to. This patterns, well, everything was pretty much done by me. And so I explained why I was against it here, and then I added another piece because I thought the page was empty. And then you can see a lot of faces from people that we know, and I try to incorporate my artist styles here. Because I hadn't mixed my T artist and my second artist, I decided to do it here so I would have another piece that helped the examiner see that I could join my two artist styles together. And then from there on, I decided to go into my final piece. Now my final piece took quite a lot of time because I joined around 600 tea bags together, dried them, and then painted them with different patterns from different countries, different in traditional patterns from different countries. It was a big piece, and this is what it would have looked like if I would have mounted it. So I was going to do two flaps made out of the actual tea bags to open. Then on the inside I was going to have my big picture. The picture itself is my final piece. So the picture itself is what I was going to have as my final piece, but the final piece kind of itself is also the hijab. But, the final piece is this. And then here I show my process and what I did. Then I annotate, and then I try to say what I mean. And then I have all my other pictures, me taking the picture. And then outside of school, I realized it didn't work. So I decided to take an actual sand dunes, which is what I did. And then I used the mannequin for it. And I decided to go the extra mile with that. And to be honest, the risk paid off. So again, something to keep in mind. Take risks for your final piece, but make sure that you know at the end they will actually be worth it. This took me a lot of time, but then again, this gave me a lot of benefits. And the bigger the hustle, the bigger the reward. So that's something to remember. And that is just it for my coursework. I will go through my exam project kind of quickly, and then I will give you my final thoughts on what you should do. Now I'm going to be talking about my exam project. The year 11s, you will be doing your exam project probably January or February. So you will be given 5 different topics to choose from, and some of them will be common, some of them will not be common. For example, for my cohort, I got reading by the lamplights, reading a book, growth, construction, other things like this. But as I said in the beginning, if you decide to go for a common topic, which is construction, then you need to make sure that you do something out of the ordinary or something that people are not going to think of doing. And so that's exactly what I did. So for mine, I picked construction, but most specifically paper construction. Again, I picked something that I found easy pictures to take from. My primary pictures, some of them are primary, some of them are secondary, but I tried my best to do all of them primary, majority of them primary, which is what I kept in mind when I did mine. So to begin, my starting point was I started with the most simple things, such as constructing paper boats or constructing planes. The first things that come to your head when you do paper construction, before I dive deeper into where I wanted to go and what direction I wanted to do. I did some drawing pieces. I fabricated my own construction piece with Lego that had a lot of different things relating to construction, actual 3D Lego pieces. So it's not something over the top, it's something simple and something that explains where I started along with my annotations. I also try to do the title in a very interactive way and so on. Then I moved into versatility of paper. Since I'm doing paper construction, the second AO is to explore your media. I needed to explore my media and show the examiner that I was exploring my media to get a high mark on that 25%. And then this is where exploring my media come from. So I decided to play around with paper ripping, play around with crumbling paper, folding paper, look at how you can represent the versatility of paper, using paper in a very ironic way, doing 3D cubes of paper. I also did a couple of flaps in this. Even though I didn't have as much work as I had for my coursework, I still made sure that I put majority of it and that I did my mounting in a very subtle way. The subtle red lines, the subtle red background, the subtle edges, the black edges around the shaded bits. It's important that you think about all the steps so that it looks elegant and that your pieces stand out. Again, annotations, crumbling of paper, folding, all of this, things that come to mind. And because I couldn't actually put the cube, I decided to just add it to my picture. And that's that. Then I did actual ripping of paper experiment where I explained how in each step I saw the versatility of paper. So it's things that you think outside of out of the box. If you really don't know where to go, you can start by exploring the media and actually telling the examiner that you're exploring the media so you can get the marks for the second assessment objective. Then I went straight into my artist. So I had already done my introduction, which was my first side. My second side was Versatility of Paper, and then I went to my artist because in the exam project you only have to fill 4 sides, I think. We will see. We have my artist. For my artist, I did decide to go the extra mile and do a lot of artist studies and a lot of artist responses, more than required, just to make up for the fact that maybe some of my pictures could not be had to be secondary or things like this, or just like to give the examiner a taste of what I can do more. So I took various pictures of all the angles of this piece, which took me a while. More artist studies and artist responses. I took all these pictures when I went to the zoo ones. Again, I used these pictures that I took at the beginning. Yep, that I took at the beginning. Again, I did annotations and then I explained my challenges with the media because I had to do this through cutting and with the knife cutting, and so it was also my first time doing so. And then I try to say how much I exploited. Then my second artist, ideally you should do 2 artists in your exam project to reach a conclusion. Paper quilting, again, had never done paper quilting in my life until I tried this out. So this piece itself was my first paper quilting piece. I try to keep the quality of it. These are actually secondary. This was a secondary image. I think it's a study. This one's a study, this one's a study, and then these 2 are my own primary images. This one was my primary image, and I try to challenge myself to use different colors and different shades, just like the artist that I had picked. From there on, little pieces as well that I could add, so I had 2. This is also my own primary picture. And then from there on, because of the situation of the virus, we had to leave school in March, and I did not have all the supplies I needed to do my final piece for my exam project, so I decided to do a smaller version, and that then reached a conclusion for my project. You probably realized that I didn't have such a strong story that I did as for my first coursework, but in reality, when it comes to exam projects, you don't really need to have a story. As long as you're exploring the topic, there really doesn't have to be a story, as long as you're looking into it and you're developing your skills within it. For example, I picked paper construction. It doesn't really have a strong story, but it's still showing that I'm developing myself in the paper construction and looking at ways that you can construct with paper. So I am meeting the criteria. Again, you don't really need to have a story. You can just have a topic and explore it like I did when it comes to media. And the AO4, as I don't think I mentioned last time, is your final piece. So my final idea for this was to construct a paper dress. Again, I didn't have the materials after the school closed, so I decided to do my own version, but a smaller version. So my final idea, I explained why I had to do it in a smaller version. I explained some images from which I was inspired from. And then I did my own. So I constructed a paper dress for a smaller version of a doll. Obviously, if I would have done this dress in real life, it would have been a bigger, better version, if I must say, but I did my best with the resources that I had, and yeah, so I tried to add as much style and as much kind of same shape. And yes, that is the end of my journey. But as you can tell, my journey took a lot of hard work and a lot of time. It was also kind of time consuming. So you need to keep this in mind when you're doing your work. Don't give up just because it seems hard, or don't just give up halfway, because the reward is big, and if you continue to work hard, then you will see the sun on the other side. So again, very important that you keep working and that you don't give up. And if you really have doubts or you don't know what you're doing, ask your teachers, talk to other students. If you have doubts that have done art before, talk to your friends. Sometimes it's people that are also doing the course with you that have the really good ideas for you. So don't hesitate to ask other people for help. And I hope that the video that I made really helped you, or that at least it gave you tips or gave you an idea of what the whole two projects need to look like. Thank you for watching this far, and I hope you well in your art GCSE journey. Thank you.